Picture a dragon-headed longship slicing through the misty waters of the North Sea, its oars cutting through the waves as fearless warriors stand ready to conquer new worlds. The sun barely breaks through the clouds, casting an eerie glow on the crew, whose fate is bound to history. These are the Vikings, seafaring legends who reshaped Europe with their bold raids, unyielding spirit, and thirst for adventure. Join us as we uncover the extraordinary rise of a people who carved their names into the annals of time, leaving behind a legacy that echoes across the centuries. Picture a dragon-headed longship, its sleek, curved hull slicing through mist-covered waters, the wind billowing in the sail as a crew of hardened warriors grips their oars. This is the image that defined the Viking Age, a period of history where a relatively small group of seafaring people from the fjords of Scandinavia changed the course of medieval Europe and beyond. The Vikings were not just raiders, they were traders, explorers, settlers, and conquerors. Their journeys spanned continents, their influence shaping cultures, economies, and political landscapes. This essay explores the Viking phenomenon, from their origins in Scandinavia, to their society and way of life, to their far-reaching voyages across Europe, Asia, and North America. The Vikings left a cultural legacy that still resonates today, from their mythological stories to the political structures they helped shape in places like Normandy and the British Isles. Before the Viking Age began in the late 8th century, Scandinavia was a largely isolated region with a harsh, rugged landscape. Comprised of the modern-day countries of Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, the area was marked by steep mountains, deep fjords, and dense forests. The climate varied, but winters were cold, and summers were short, making agriculture a challenge. Early Scandinavian societies were largely agrarian, with small, self-sustaining farming communities. These villages were built around extended families, where each member had a specific role. Men were primarily engaged in farming, fishing, and trade, while women managed the household and were crucial in the raising of children. By the end of the Iron Age, circa 500 AD, Scandinavian society was undergoing significant changes. The development of social hierarchies began, with powerful chiefs, or jarls at the top, followed by the free peasants, known as carls, and the slaves, or thralls, who made up the lower rungs of society. The Scandinavian economy was based on a combination of farming, animal husbandry, and burgeoning trade routes that connected the region with other parts of Europe. Key technological advancements during this period, particularly in shipbuilding and metalwork, would lay the foundation for the Viking Age. The most notable of these innovations was the longship, a highly maneuverable vessel designed for both shallow and deep water navigation. Its design, featuring a long narrow hull and a single sail, allowed for swift movement along the coasts and rivers, facilitating both raiding and trading. This revolutionary technology, coupled with ironworking skills, made the Vikings a formidable force and set the stage for their expansion into the wider world. Viking society was hierarchical but also deeply communal, with clear divisions between different social classes. At the top were the jarls, or nobles, who controlled the land, wealth, and resources. They lived in fortified homesteads and played a significant role in both local and regional politics. Below them were the carls, free farmers and artisans who formed the backbone of Viking society. The carls had a certain level of autonomy and were able to own land, but they were also subject to the rule of their local chieftain, or thing, assembly. At the bottom of the social ladder were the thralls, or slaves, who were often captured during raids or born into servitude. Thralls were responsible for the menial labor of Viking society, such as working the fields or tending to animals, but they could also be skilled craftsmen or warriors if they were able to gain their freedom. Despite their low status, thralls could occasionally rise in society, especially in cases where they were freed or became valued for their skills. Family life was central to Viking society. Most Vikings lived in extended family units in longhouses, with several generations under one roof. The household was usually organized around a male head, but women also had significant roles, especially in the management of the home, childcare, and the care of livestock. Women had some legal rights, including the ability to own property, demand a divorce, and be active in decision-making. Viking law and governance were based on a system of assemblies, known as things. These were gatherings where free men could meet to discuss matters of law, resolve disputes, and make decisions about their communities. The thing was a highly democratic institution, where each free man had a voice, although the most powerful jarls often had more influence. At the heart of Viking expansion was their mastery of seafaring technology, most notably embodied in the longship. These sleek vessels, designed for speed, versatility, and durability, were crucial to the Vikings' ability to travel vast distances and engage in both trade and raids. The longship's design featured a keel, which provided structural integrity, and a shallow draft, allowing it to navigate both open seas and shallow rivers with equal ease. This made the longship perfect for both coastal exploration and river-based raids, which were critical to the Vikings' success. The longship's symmetrical ends also allowed it to reverse direction quickly, making it an ideal vessel for surprise attacks. Its single sail and oars gave it great maneuverability and speed, while the use of clinker-built construction, where wooden planks overlapped, ensured that the ship could withstand the rigors of long voyages. Viking shipbuilders were experts in using local materials like oak, and their craftsmanship set them apart from other maritime cultures. Viking sailors were skilled navigators, using a variety of tools to find their way across the open seas. They employed sunstones, a type of crystal believed to help locate the sun on overcast days, which was crucial for timekeeping and direction. The stars provided a reliable means of navigation at night, and landmarks such as distinctive coastlines were used to chart courses. In addition to these tools, Viking mariners relied on oral traditions and charts passed down through generations, which detailed known routes and hazards along the way. Viking shipyards were central hubs for their maritime activities, where artisans honed their shipbuilding skills. These craftsmen worked in close-knit communities, ensuring that every ship was finely crafted to withstand the harsh conditions of Viking voyages. The longship was not just a vessel for warfare, but a symbol of Viking ingenuity and their connection to the sea. The Viking Age is often said to have begun with the raid on Lindisfarne in 793 AD. The attack on this Christian monastery on the northeast coast of England shocked the Anglo-Saxons and marked a new era in European history. The raid, characterized by its brutality and surprise, sent a clear message. The Vikings were not just a local threat, but a force to be reckoned with on the international stage. The event signaled the beginning of centuries of Viking raids and exploration that would stretch across Europe and beyond. The motivations behind the Vikings' raids were multifaceted. While wealth and the pursuit of treasure were certainly primary drivers, the desire for prestige and glory in battle also played a significant role. For many Viking warriors, the raid was an opportunity to acquire riches and gain status. Additionally, Scandinavia's growing population and limited arable land may have pushed many Vikings to seek new territories to conquer or trade with. The overpopulation in some areas of Scandinavia likely exacerbated the need for land and resources, driving the Viking expansion. The early Viking raids targeted rich and vulnerable regions. The British Isles were an obvious choice due to their proximity and the wealth of monasteries and towns that were poorly defended. Ireland, with its numerous coastal settlements, also became a prime target. The Vikings also began raiding the northern coasts of Francia, a wealthy and politically fragmented kingdom. The raids soon evolved into more organized invasions, with Vikings establishing temporary bases in places like York, Jorvik, and later, permanent settlements. By the 9th century, Viking raiders were not just plundering. They were establishing footholds and expanding their influence across the continent. The pattern of hit-and-run tactics eventually gave way to more sustained campaigns that would shape the course of European history. The Viking presence in the British Isles and Ireland was transformative, with the Norsemen establishing both settlements and political power in many regions. The most notable of these was the founding of Dublin, which became one of the most important Viking trading centers in Europe. Established around 841 AD, Dublin was strategically located on Ireland's east coast, providing the Vikings with easy access to both Irish and Anglo-Saxon trade routes. The settlement quickly grew into a vibrant hub for commerce, culture, and military activity, with the Vikings establishing dominance over much of the surrounding region. Viking raids and settlements in England led to the creation of the Danelaw, a series of Viking-controlled territories across northern and eastern England. The Vikings frequently clashed with the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, especially in places like Wessex, where King Alfred the Great mounted a successful defense. However, in many areas the Vikings were not simply conquerors. They became part of the local fabric, intermarrying with Anglo-Saxons and integrating into the political systems of the regions they controlled. In Ireland, the Vikings' influence was equally significant. They did not just raid, but they established towns and forged alliances with local rulers. By the mid-9th century, the Vikings had formed a critical part of Ireland's political landscape. They engaged in cultural exchange, introducing new technologies, crafts, and even religious practices. Viking-run towns such as Waterford and Cork flourished, and the Norsemen in Ireland became known for their naval prowess, trade connections, and skill in metalworking. The genetic legacy of the Vikings in the British Isles and Ireland is still evident today. Studies of modern populations in areas once controlled by the Vikings have shown significant Norse genetic markers, especially in regions like the Orkney Islands, the Isle of Man, and parts of northern England. The Vikings left a lasting mark on the language, culture, and genetic makeup of the British Isles and Ireland, with their influence extending well beyond their initial raids and settlements. The Viking Age, therefore, not only changed the political landscape, but also reshaped the cultural and genetic heritage of the islands for centuries to come. As the Viking Age progressed, many Norsemen turned their attention eastward, following the river systems that stretched deep into Eastern Europe and beyond. One of the most notable Viking ventures in this direction was the establishment of the Kievan Rus, a powerful state that would eventually give rise to modern Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. Viking Varangians, led by the legendary figure Rurik, were among the first to settle and rule in the region. The Varangians played a pivotal role in the formation of Kievan Rus, often serving as both rulers and military leaders. By the 9th century, the Varangians had established a strong presence in the region, and their influence shaped the political and cultural development of the Slavic peoples. The Vikings' eastern ventures also brought them into contact with the Byzantine Empire, where they became well known as mercenaries. The Varangian Guard, an elite corps of warriors, was primarily composed of Norsemen, who served as personal bodyguards to the Byzantine emperors. Their reputation for fierce loyalty and fighting prowess made them an invaluable part of the imperial court. The Guard not only protected the emperor, but also helped in various military campaigns across the empire, solidifying the Vikings' place in Byzantine history. The Vikings' extensive trade networks further expanded eastward, reaching the caliphates in Central Asia. They traded goods such as furs, timber, and amber for silver, spices, and textiles, creating a vast web of connections that extended all the way to the distant lands of the Middle East and the heart of Asia. These trade routes also facilitated the exchange of cultural and technological ideas, influencing Viking society and introducing new practices and innovations from the East. The Vikings' role in the Silk Roads allowed them to serve as intermediaries between the West and the Islamic world, contributing to the spread of goods, knowledge, and culture. While the Vikings are most often associated with raiding, they were also skilled colonizers. Their journeys led them to establish settlements in several far-flung regions, from the icy landscapes of Iceland and Greenland to the fertile lands of Normandy and France. One of the most famous Viking settlements was Iceland, where Norsemen established a unique society that became the heart of Viking law and culture. Iceland's remote location and harsh environment did not deter the Vikings, who thrived there by building strong communities centered around agriculture, fishing, and trade. The Alþingi, one of the world's oldest parliamentary institutions, was founded in Iceland in 930 AD, further cementing the country's role in Viking governance. In Greenland, Norse colonization began in the late 10th century under the leadership of Eric the Red, who established a settlement along the island's southwestern coast. Despite the island's harsh Arctic climate, Viking settlers built farms and engaged in fishing and hunting, including the famous hunting of walruses. The Greenland settlements, however, eventually declined by the 15th century, likely due to a combination of environmental changes, resource depletion, and isolation. Perhaps one of the most ambitious Viking ventures was the discovery of Vinland, located in present-day Newfoundland, Canada. Led by Leif Erikson, the Vikings reached North America around the year 1000, where they established a short-lived settlement. While the Norse presence in Vinland was limited, it represents one of the earliest European expeditions to the New World. In Normandy, the Viking settlement had lasting political consequences. The region's name itself, Normandy, comes from the Norsemen, or Northmen, who settled there in the 9th century. The Viking leader Rollo famously became the first Duke of Normandy in 911 AD after striking a deal with the French king. This marked the beginning of a significant integration of Viking culture with the local Frankish society. Over time, the Norse settlers in Normandy assimilated into the local feudal structures, adopting the French language and customs, and establishing a powerful dynasty that would eventually produce William the Conqueror, the first Norman king of England. At the core of Viking culture was a rich and complex belief system that influenced many aspects of their daily life and cultural expressions. The Norse pantheon was headed by the all-powerful god Odin, the god of wisdom, war, and poetry. Odin's two ravens, Hugin and Munin, symbolized thought and memory, and his warriors, the Valkyries, chose the bravest of the fallen to join him in the afterlife in Valhalla. Other prominent gods included Thor, the thunder god, who wielded the hammer Mjolnir to protect humanity from giants, and Freya, the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility. The Vikings practiced a range of rituals and sacrificial rites, often to appease their gods and ensure success in battle or in farming. These ceremonies were performed at sacred sites, such as groves or sacred stones, and involved offerings of food, weapons, or even human sacrifices. The Vikings believed that their fate was intertwined with the gods' will, and their rituals were a way to maintain a favorable relationship with the divine. The sagas, epic poems and prose narratives, were one of the primary ways that Viking history, myths, and legends were passed down through generations. These stories, often written in Old Norse, recounted heroic deeds, family feuds, and the adventures of gods and mortals. The rune stones, inscribed with runes, an early form of writing, served both as memorials and as means of communication. These stones often celebrated Viking victories, commemorated the dead, or marked the establishment of settlements. The Vikings also had a rich tradition of skaldic poetry, where bards, known as skalds, composed intricate verses in praise of kings, warriors, and gods. Skaldic poetry was highly valued and was often performed at feasts or during ceremonies, reinforcing the Vikings' sense of identity and honor. The legacy of the Vikings extends far beyond the Viking Age itself, leaving a profound impact on Europe's political landscape, linguistic development, and cultural imagination. In the medieval period, the Vikings' influence continued to be felt in the kingdoms and territories they once raided and settled. The Viking settlements in Normandy, for example, helped shape the feudal systems in France and England. The Norman conquest of England in 1066, led by William the Conqueror, was a direct result of Viking migration and conquest. The Old Norse language, spoken by the Viking settlers, also contributed to the development of the English language, with numerous Norse-derived words still in use today. Additionally, the Vikings' expansion eastward had a lasting impact on the Kievan Rus, which became a precursor to the modern Russian state. Their trade routes, which connected Scandinavia with Byzantium and the Caliphates, contributed to the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies across vast distances, laying the groundwork for the rise of powerful empires and trade networks in Europe and beyond. Archaeological discoveries continue to reveal new insights into Viking life, challenging old perceptions and offering fresh perspectives on their cultural legacy. Excavations of Viking ship burials, settlements, and artifacts have provided valuable evidence of their advanced craftsmanship, social organization, and religious practices. The Viking Ship Museum in Oslo, Norway, for example, houses well-preserved Viking ships that offer a tangible connection to their maritime prowess. These discoveries help to reconstruct a more accurate and multifaceted image of the Vikings, beyond the stereotypical warrior image. Ultimately, the Vikings' legacy lives on in the political, linguistic, and cultural spheres of modern society. From the languages we speak to the stories we tell, the Vikings continue to shape our collective imagination, leaving a lasting mark on history that endures to this day.